Hi guys, this is Megan, also known as Going Green Mom. I am gonna try and get this done real quick before my kiddos wake up. Um, the last few weeks I've been thinking about a lot about food storage. I used to um, do a lot more food storage than I've been doing lately, but lately I have been dealing with histamine intolerance. I broke out with hives for a few months last summer. So I've been really switching how I eat. And that does affect the way we store food because with histamine intolerance, it's really recommended that you not eat vinegars, anything fermented, canned goods. So, um, a lot of the ways I had been storing food are not options now. So I'm just kind of putting this together to sort of sort through some of those things and figured maybe this might help somebody else that also wants to plan out their food storage, even though they have this um, histamine issue going on at this point. So what is histamine intolerance? Um, Everybody has a wide variety of symptoms. It kind of is based on where the breakdown is in your body as far as the uses of histamine. Histamine is required for normal functions, but the way it was explained to me, it's a little like a bucket, and say in a normal everyday situation for most people, they need about an inch in their bucket to signal their body to produce those hormones and things to start off different reactions within the body. But um, then with people with histamine intolerance, there's two ways you wind up with histamine. Either your body produces histamine or you consume food that already contains histamine. So, um, depending on what you have going on, you might be doing some of both. Sorry, I have a cat trying to climb on my keyboard. Okay, so since you there are probably ways that I'm not going to get into here that you can adjust how your body is producing histamine. There's definitely ways you can adjust how your body is processing histamine. But the way we're going to focus on with food storage is being able to store food in a way that does not um, cause it to overflow your body with histamine because it's relatively low histamine when you consume it. Um, so, um, with that, there are certain ways that um, reduce histamine, things like freezing and cooking things quickly creates less histamine than um, cooking things for an extended period of time or leaving them at room temperature. So my goal is to develop a food storage and pantry management plan that keeps me healthy while supplying my family with well-balanced, nutritious, and delicious food, and also prioritizes my sanity. Anybody that has started a low histamine diet probably has run into a wide variety of advice online, most of it contradicting itself. So that can cause some problems in the sanity department, especially when you're trying to figure out what you need to do to get better. Um, and we aren't always thinking clearly because you might have brain fog, you might be itching like crazy because of hives, or you might be running to the bathroom constantly. So it's hard to maybe make some of the decisions. So the goal is to um, not go crazy while I'm trying to figure out what I can eat and how I can store it. And of course, the nutritious and delicious part. I've got two teenagers, and they like their food to taste good. Yeah, so do I. So store what you eat and eat what you store. This is age-old principle of regular food storage. Um, if you can't tolerate grains, there's not really much point in storing grains because when you go to eat it, it's going to make you sick. Um, so the goal really is to find things that you can eat and then figure out ways to store those things um, in a manner that you'll still want to eat them when you need to prepare them. So for instance, if you don't like the way, um, say, dried beans like rehydrate or whatever when they're cooked, there's not much point in storing them. um, but that's kind of beside the point. But store what you eat what you store is a principle we're going to go back to regularly. So what can I eat? This will be different for each of us, but the goal for all of us, I hope, is to store things that we can eat and not get sick off of. And for some of us, that might be balancing things that we only slightly react to or that kind of thing. I know I've talked to a lot of people that have been doing this for years in a group over on Facebook called Low Histamine Diet Support. And they know what they can eat once or twice a week when they want it, and not get sick or not have too many symptoms to be overloaded. So after a while, you do kind of get to the point you know what those things are and you know just not to overdo them. But for the most part, I'm going to focus on storing food that I know I'm not going to get sick off of. So what can I eat? There are certain things, like I mentioned, that generally speaking, we're told is just not a good idea. Vinegars, canned goods, things that are fermented. Even though they're healthy for a lot of people, they're not necessarily healthy for those of us with histamine intolerance because they are high histamine foods. So what can we eat? Fresh foods are normally not paid any attention to in a food storage plan because aside from like some winter squash or maybe potatoes or apples or something over winter in a cool spot, there's not a whole lot of storing of fresh foods for the long term. So, from a histamine intolerance standpoint, one thing I want to mention here is that I used to do grocery shopping once a month, and I am noticing I have to change that. So while I might be able to store carrots in my refrigerator for 3 weeks and not react to them, if I store celery after about a week, I am starting to react to that even though it's still good. So just be cognizant of that as you're doing your planning. Frozen foods are a great option. I am sorry about that. Um, so frozen foods are a great option that I have been utilizing more and more, especially from a vegetable standpoint. If I don't get to fresh foods right away, they can still cause problems later down the road. Whereas if I buy stuff frozen, it can sit in my freezer and it doesn't matter if I don't have the energy to cook it right then. Freeze-dried foods are a type of food that has been processed in such a way that it has like 97 to 98% of the moisture removed from it. And from what I am finding, that food has the amount of histamines that it goes into the processing with. So if it's high histamine when it goes in, it'll be high histamine when it comes out. But if you um, buy from somewhere that buys directly from the farm, it's not sitting around for weeks before it's processed. At least my hope is that it will be okay because it will come out relatively low histamine. Obviously, there's some foods that are just naturally high histamine, and that probably won't happen, but dried goods are pretty self-explanatory. They are a staple part of most food storage plans. However, obviously, if you don't tolerate grains or pasta, well, don't store pasta. There's ways to work around it, but that's some of the stuff that I hope to look into in the future. Um, every good food storage plan needs to store water. And then preparation methods. There are a few preparation methods that work better for histamine intolerance and low histamine diets than others. Generally speaking, you want to take things from whatever stage you've safely acquired them in to cooked, eaten, and resaved or frozen or whatever you're doing quickly. Because the more time something is cooking or sitting or whatever, the more chance it has to produce histamines. So fresh, some ideas for fresh foods. I'm generally thinking towards wintertime. It is currently springtime here in northern Indiana, and we are also currently unable to always acquire what we would like to from the stores due to the illness that's currently going on. And I do believe that's pretty much the case around the world for the most part to some degree. So thinking towards if something happened during winter and I could not get fresh food because they're not transporting, the supply chain is broken, I don't have a garden outside, whatever the case may be, some options for fresh food I came up with were sprouting seeds, which would also require jars, normally just a canning jar with a screen top lid and a ring to hold that on, and you use water. Assuming I keep doing these videos, I might do a tutorial or something on that as I start that, because I have not been doing that currently. Seeds to plant a garden. These can be the same seeds that you use to sprout, or they can be different seeds. It really doesn't matter, as long as they're seeds that would grow in your area. Whether you have room for a container garden, of course, then you might want to consider storing containers and things as well. Or if you can just plant right in the ground. Starting a garden is obviously a longer term horizon for food than, say, sprouts, which you can get in a matter of maybe a week. Microgreens, you can usually have those ready to eat in a week or two. Kitchen window herb gardens. It doesn't have to be a kitchen window. It could just be wherever you have a sunny spot to put your herbs that aren't too temperature sensitive. I have had plants on the windowsills in my kitchen for quite a few years, and some of them like being that close to the window, and some of them really don't like it during the winter. So anyway, those were some options I came up with for fresh food when I just can't go buy it. That could be storage possibilities. Frozen foods, like I said, is another option. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can buy foods and freeze them, or you can buy them from frozen at the store. A lot of times at the store, even if they are, say, in the instance of meat, say it is in the cooler section, there's a good chance that that meat came in frozen. Sometimes I've found that you can just ask for still frozen packages and employees would get it for you. Otherwise, a good option is buying already frozen. Flash frozen is usually best because it's frozen the quickest. And some people have a lot of luck with fish with that if they make sure that it's frozen like on the boat that it's caught on. Personally, I'm sensitive to most of the fish that I like to eat. I don't particularly care for salmon, so I don't store a lot of fish, but I do okay with beef and chicken. So those are ones I choose to store. Vegetables, you can usually get them in small bags, or you can get them in large bags some places if you have like a restaurant supply store. Um, and generally they're frozen at the peak of their freshness, so it's a pretty comparable way to get um, your nutrients and stuff that's not all that off of um, fresh. And at that point, you don't have to worry about how long it sits in your refrigerator after you buy it because it's still going to be good. Fruit, the same thing. I absolutely love my smoothies in the morning. Good way to get some of my vitamins and stuff. It's also um, quick meals prepared at the store is not necessarily a great option for most people with histamine intolerance, just due to the things that have been added to them. But a lot of times you can prepare meals or like double prepare a meal and then freeze one so that you can just pull a quick meal out when you need to. And that is generally okay from what I have found. One thing I like to do is actually to prepare meals, section it off into pre-portioned amounts so that I can just pull one meal out. My kids are at their dad's every other week, so cooking for one, in my opinion, is not terribly fun. And I don't mind eating the same things day after day. I might make two things and then spread them spread them out, alternate the two. And then just vary it week to week. But so that's a good option if you have the space in your freezer for sort of ready-made microwave dinners that you made so you know are safe. Another option for that is if you don't have a whole lot of time each evening to cook, or whenever you do your main cooking, you can pre-prepare ingredients. So say you weren't able to get still frozen ground beef, you can bring it home, cook it up in patties or just ground beef. That way, all you have to do is pull out a single meal portion for your family, toss it in the pan to heat it up, and then add whatever else it is you're cooking that night. Freeze-dried foods. As I mentioned earlier, the water has been removed from these. I don't really understand the freeze-dried process. This isn't a type of food I've dealt with a whole lot. I am expecting my first order of some freeze-dried foods here in the next week. But the histamine levels stay the same as before they were processed. So if you can find a company that is good about getting vegetables straight from the farmer or fruits or whatever it is they're processing, because there's even freeze-dried meat options. And then you can just if they're processing them, your time kind of starts when, again, when you rehydrate it. You would need to plan on storing more water to rehydrate if you're planning for an emergency where you maybe don't have power, so you couldn't pump water or that type of thing. My hope with freeze-dried food is that it will be helpful as I am without my kids. So that I can only pull out, a tablespoon of something if I want to make an omelet or something like that. So I don't have to have fresh produce here to cut up and add to that, and I can add more nutrition than just whatever's left over in the fridge, which is something we're not supposed to really do, is eat leftovers. So dried food, like I said, this is a very typical food storage way of doing things. Rice, beans, pastas are often used. They're lighter weight than canned counterparts, And of course, we can't have canned anyway. But it's a way to get foods in bulk and to store them that is, while still heavy, is much lighter than if it was actually in their sort of prepared form. I am hoping to do some snacks this way. If you don't have gastrointestinal issues, it appears from questions I've been asking that popcorn is okay. I have not noticed an issue with it. Most of my symptoms are central nervous system related, so I don't really have a lot of the gastrointestinal issues. And I am okay with some grains. So mainly the gluten-free ones, which is another thing. Most people seem to be gluten-free with this diet, as they're trying to heal gut issues and things. I'm sensitive to gluten-containing grains, even though I'm not sensitive to gluten, so I do eat gluten-free. So some snacks I am hoping to store are popcorn. The big thing there seems to be storing just plain popcorn, preferably organic, non-GMO, since some of us do react to chemicals, and then cooking it on the stove in some oil, and then depending on preferences to whether or not you season with salt or butter or ghee, or I found ghee and some pink Himalayan salt work really well the other day. This does remove slightly less water than freeze drying. I was finding like anywhere from 93 to 95%, I think. Some things you need to be aware of, things like raisins, craisins, dried apricots, don't remove as much of the, you still have this sort of sticky, syrupy consistency in those, and that still allows for histamines to develop. So we, generally speaking, dried fruit is not good for most of us. But it seems like things like a crispy dried apple ring should be okay because an apple is a low histamine food. And also, assuming it is not a chewy type apple ring, it would not be able to produce histamines. I'm probably going to test that in the next month. We'll have to see. Hopefully it goes well because the order I put in was for 4 pounds of something, and my kids looked at me like, "Are you crazy? I don't even know what an apple ring is." And it doesn't sound good to begin with. I used to like them. I'm just not willing to pay the price of a little bag of them. So we'll hope that they like those. But there's some ideas for dried food. Water, just a good part of any storage plan. General guidelines are 1 gallon per person per day, 1 quart per pet per day. Use some common sense here. If you have a large dog, 1 quart's probably not enough. If you have a small animal, probably not needing that much. You will need to usually plan extra for rehydrating freeze-dried and dried foods. Those are usually not accounted for in that gallon, even if a little bit is sort of calculated for cooking. And then you need extra for cleaning and hygiene purposes. So how do I cook? The goal is to take it from frozen or whatever dry form it is to eaten or refrozen in as short a time frame as possible. Like I said, with the fresh food, generally speaking, I don't want to leave stuff sit in my refrigerator for a long period of time because it will be developing histamines. And the same thing goes for, I don't want to thaw something out for 2 or 3 days before I cook it. Generally speaking, I try to cook from frozen when possible, or with as little thawing as possible when it's not. I have found that I've got an Instapot, which is an electric pressure cooker that works really well because I can cook from frozen. Things like boneless, skinless chicken breasts. Since chicken skin seems to be a high histamine thing, I don't use chicken most of the time that has skin on. But I can buy boneless, skinless breast pretty easily at a decent price at my local Aldi's. So I just take a frozen bag of chicken breasts, dump them in the Instapot with a little bit of water, and then I can pull that out when it gets done after 35 minutes. Prep it to go in my containers, cook some rice in that same liquid to give it some flavor. Put that in those containers, and then honestly, guys, I just dump frozen vegetables into the meal prep containers, put the lids on, and put them in the freezer. Probably lose a little bit of quality because I don't put things back in the refrigerator until they're completely cooled. It's not enough that I notice all that much. So I did mention earlier the flash freezing thing. With fish, it seems to be that some boats can flash freeze on the boat so that it doesn't sit on the boat for a day while it's coming back into port, getting given to whoever to process, and then getting frozen. And that seems to work better for people. Like I mentioned, I don't eat a whole lot of fish because I'm sensitive to the kinds that I would actually cook and eat. And that kind of gets back to that store what you eat and eat what you store. I don't store a lot of fish because I don't eat a lot of fish. My kids absolutely love shrimp, so we do store a little bit of that. So process wise, the process I am working through with this, what is the one meal I can eat that allows my symptoms to clear up if I only eat that? That's where I'm starting because that's my immediate thing to fall back on. If I don't know what else I can eat, I will grab those components and eat that because I know it's safe. I don't really want to store a lot of food that I'm uncertain of. I did buy 4 pounds of apple rings because I was buying it from As Your Standard and they do bulk food. So I'm sure I can pass that on to people that will eat it if I do react to it and the kids don't like it. Ultimately, I would generally try smaller quantities first and then build from there. Each of us is going to be at a different point in this. I have done food storage before, so I have a pretty good month worth of food in the house at any given time. But I'd really like to get back to the 3 months. So I'm going to start with one meal and kind of build up as I find things I can eat that are coherent and go from there. Step 2, what is my time horizon and my preparedness needs? So my time horizon right now is to get back to 3 months worth of food. Like I mentioned earlier, we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. There have been in the US farmers having to dump food because they can't get it transported or because they just don't have anyone to actually pick the food out of the fields. Other places, they don't have people to buy it because the schools and the restaurants have been shut down. Other places, they've had outbreaks of the virus, and so the processing plants are shutting down. So even if there's not a current shortage, which there has been on some things, other things I am kind of preparing for a shortage that's likely to happen in the next 6 months to a year. And just because I want to make sure that I have what I need when I need it. So that is kind of my time horizon. Ultimately, I would love to have a year's worth of food storage. It's not likely to happen where I'm currently at because in step 3, I don't have the space for a year's worth of food storage for 3 people. I would have food sitting everywhere. Now, don't get me wrong, I have some things that will last us a year. I just bought a 25-pound bag of oats in that order from As Your Standard, and that will probably last us 6 months or more. I've got rice that is ordered because I know that I tolerate white jasmine rice pretty well. That will probably last us probably close to a year, honestly, because I bought it in bulk. But you need to know where you're going to store your food once you get your food. If you have a refrigerator freezer, don't plan to store 6 months worth of frozen food. You don't have anywhere to store it. You might need to think about getting a chest freezer or a secondary upright freezer. But you need to know where you're going to store your food so that it doesn't go bad once you buy it. Step 4, how much can I spend toward food storage and how often? I am kind of looking to get my grocery budget back in order. It has been higher than what I would like it to since I started this low histamine thing. And because of that, I am trying to work in my food storage into my grocery spending and gradually reduce overall how much I'm spending each month. For me, this looks like I'm doing 2 less normal grocery shopping orders a month, and then I am adding in an order from somewhere with freeze-dried food. There's a variety of those. I'll go in depth more later. Or a bulk order, or next month I've got a beef that will be coming, or a quarter of a beef animal that will be coming to fill the freezer. So I'm just kind of planning that money into what I've already been spending, and then once my sort of longer term things like the oats and the rice are stocked up, I'll try and step down how much I spend each month. But remember, you can just start with a few dollars each trip and pick up, you know, an extra package of pasta or an extra package of meat for the freezer, or whatever works for you. Which kind of puts us into step 5, make a list and work on sourcing. I haven't always done my food storage this way. Most of the time in the past, I've just gone to the regular grocery store. I am taking the extra time I have to research and prepare at this point, and the need to stay out of stores to kind of research on the freeze-dried food options and try things like ordering from a bulk co-op where you just go pick it up at the truck. So those are some different things, and I will probably address those over the next few weeks in more of these. So kind of the homework I've set is, for myself, find that first meal. I've already told you guys what my first meal is. So I will be bulking up the amount of chicken I have in my freezer. I have rice on order, and I do currently have probably a good month and a half worth of vegetables in the freezer, and some freeze-dried vegetables on their way to me. Another thing that I have run into that I think is a good thing to think about, because it seems like a lot of us with histamine intolerance are having to supplement our nutrition in one way or another to stay as healthy as possible and to deal with various symptoms. So I have lots of supplements, and the plan is to just make a list of those and then figure out what you need to get that stock up to however long you're wanting to store things for. Um, since the virus issues have happened, I've noticed that some of the things I would normally order 6 months at a time just for free shipping purposes um, are actually not available, or they're being restricted to one bottle per order because they have gotten hit hard supply wise because they are good at boosting immune systems, or they have particularly good history of um, helping in response to viruses. So just making sure we have what we need to function, I think is a pretty good thing. So thanks for listening to me this long. This has gotten a little longer than the last time I tried. But I'm excited to finally start working on a plan and figuring out how to do this again. I hope you guys will come with me on this journey and kind of watch and join in, maybe give me some pointers if I'm missing something that could work really well, or if I'm doing something that's really stupid in terms of it'll get me sick later when I don't expect it to. Feel free to follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I don't post a whole lot there, but that's normally syndicated from Instagram. Or Facebook. I'm at Going Green Mom and pretty much any of those places. I'll talk to you guys later.